powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems.
चुन चुन करके हिसाब लेना ये मेरी फितरत है.
Why should it be a problem if I'm smart enough to have multiple options? You should be admiring me.
भारत झुकने वाला भी नहीं.
The rise of India will be determined by India. It will be determined by our strength, not by the mistakes of others.
The old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Now let's talk about petrodollar in this video. I haven't talked about petrodollar in a long time, but let's talk about petrodollar, okay? And this is gonna be a very interesting video, so please do stay with me till the end and please do like and subscribe. All right, let's get started. See, we have heard a lot that petrodollar is ending, petrodollar is dying, it's doomed, this, that. And especially whenever somebody withdraws some treasury securities or liquidates securities from treasury or somewhere or the US stock market, then you see the news, right? Oh, $1 trillion lost, treasury is gone, countries are withdrawing, dollar is doomed, this, that. But what if I told you that America is right now working on its grand plan to ensure the safety of the petrodollar? But the question really is how? What exactly is the grand plan here? Or can even it be saved? Right? That's the most important question with the things going on around us, right? If you look into Middle East, Saudi, Pakistan, then Pakistan is not a Middle Eastern country. They would like to think so. But anyway, Saudi, Pakistan and Turkey, they're trying to form this, defense pact, alliance and everything. They're saying that other countries are going to join it, which means that Middle East is redrawing its own security architecture framework. Then Israel is on a different level, right? But the question really is that in this whole entire thing, if all these countries are wanting US to get out of the Middle East, which means that they're not going to rely on the dollar for too long. They're not going to agree to sell oil in the dollar for too long, especially Saudi Arabia. So the question is how US is planning to save the petrodollar then? And that's what we are going to talk about. We are going to talk about the steps that US is taking or has taken to save the petrodollar, okay? So please do like and subscribe. Let's get going. Let's get started and let's talk about it, okay? Now, first step that US is taking is building a Western Hemisphere energy bloc. The US and other Latin American countries, and in fact countries in the Western Hemisphere, they already have free trade agreements and they have lots and lots of trade agreements among themselves. Only thing that US will have to do is that they will have to come up with some sort of energy bloc or something, number one thing. And the US already has WTI, the Western Texas pricing model for the oil as well, okay? And to understand the difference between Brent and WTI, you will have to read about it. But WTI is already there for it, okay? So number one thing is that build a Western Hemisphere energy bloc. Now, let me actually share my screen to explain you why that is and how important this whole entire game is. All right. So let me share my screen. Okay, there you go. Now, in this whole entire thing, if you look at it, okay. Now, let's start with Latin America. Now, you see here, you have Venezuela, you have Guyana, you have Brazil, you have Bolivia, you have Argentina. These are the countries that have oil. They sell oil. Okay. Then when you come up a little bit further, then you have one second. Then you have Big Daddy of all right here, Canada. Then United States already has lots and lots of oil for itself. Okay. So all this is already present. Okay. because if you go into this whole entire map, right, then you have Alaska, you have Canada, you have US, then you have Venezuela, then you have Brazil, then you have Bolivia, you have Argentina. Okay, this is how big this oil block is going to be. All right, so that's the number one move. And out of this whole entire move, if you notice, Argentina is already decommissioning or sunsetting its own currency, peso. And Argentina allows US dollar and keeps the peso in there too. Slowly and slowly. I mean, problem with Argentina was that Argentina, uh, Argentina economy was using peso. Oh, sorry, they were already using dollar. So Millet thought that okay, let's uh, make dollar a legal tender as well. So this way, people will use more and more dollar, and eventually peso will sunset. And that's exactly what Argentina is doing. Argentina is already doing that part. But as you saw, the oil part, right? Now, step two is the redirect the global buyers. Because without the buyers, there is no point in having the oil. And why there are not many buyers? Why there are not many buyers is because most of the buyers are in the Asian continent, that is like completely on the opposite side of the globe, right? In the Eastern Hemisphere, that's where the most of the population of the world is. So this is why Middle East actually in the beginning, in the starting point of this whole petrodollar, Saudi Arabia and Iraq and all these countries, they mattered. And Saudi Arabia became important because it was one of the biggest sources of globally traded oil in those days, simply because of the Asian countries. You have China and India, they're highly populated. That's like 3 billion, half of the population is in these two countries. So the strategic objective was ultimately keeping global energy deeply tied to the dollar system through this whole entire thing, right? So now how US is going to redirect the global buyers? US is redirecting by making a mess. By making a mess where? Let me again share my screen. So the mess is being made right here in this whole entire region. So what's going to happen? India has already pretty much nullified its oil imports from this region. India is not importing any oil from Iraq. It has come down to zero. Only thing that India is was doing is the natural gas from Qatar. So that's also gone completely. Pretty much a lot of it is gone. Okay. And down the line, maybe from United Arab Emirates, India will buy oil down the line next year, and that is also through Oman. Okay, and then from Oman, India will buy like here. So they will get rid of this Strait of Hormuz. Okay, China same way. China has stopped buying from this region, from Iran and all that. Okay, and Russians don't need that. The Russians are buying their refined oil and everything from India, and because after Ukraine hit their refineries. But this, all in all, this whole entire region has become a mess. So for the countries that are in this region, other options for them are what? Other options for them are in Africa. What is that? What are those options? Libya, Algeria. Then you have there are a few other countries here. Nigeria is there, right? And if you go here, you will see Nigeria, and then you have Nigeria. Then you have a few other countries, right? And they are buying oil from these countries right here. You have Nigeria, right? So these are the options. Just keep this in mind, okay? But African countries will abide by the dollar system. They're not going to bother about things, okay? But main thing was securing that and then redirecting the supply chain. And this supply chain has already been redirected. India is buying uranium from Canada. India has already started to look into this whole importing oil from buying oil from Canada as well. India is heavily investing in the Arctic. What is in the Arctic? Alaska, Canada, and Russia. right? India is moving there. China has already moved there. China has already started to post its, moves its ships through that Arctic. They just did it like 2 weeks ago or so, and India is going to do it next year. The first Arctic shipment through the Arctic Ocean. So so technically, if you look into it, then the whole entire energy supply chain is already shifting towards the Western Hemisphere. Simply for one reason. Yeah, one reason. That reason is the Arctic. Okay. Why? Because the Arctic will be the shortcut. Up until now, Asian countries bought oil from the Middle East because it was the shortest supply chain. Now, in the energy, when it comes to energy, having a long supply chain for energy, it doesn't add up as far as numbers are concerned. Why? Because it becomes costly, and costly energy is never good for your general public. This is why all these other great powers like China, India, and all that, they were buying their oil from the Middle East all along. Why? Because of the shorter supply chain. Shorter supply chain is normally considered cheaper and more secure. Why? Because insurance cost is low. Okay. Now, after the Arctic is gonna open by 2035. Why? Because the summer ice will completely melt. In winter, yes, it will be a problem. Still, it will be a problem. But at the end of it all, summer ice will be gone. So at least during the summertime, countries will have a very short supply chain. And lots of supply chain has already moved to the Western Hemisphere. I'll give a simple example. India has started to buy started to buy more oil from Brazil. India has started to buy more oil from the United States. India is working with Venezuela. India has cut out all the middlemen. So Venezuelan oil was, instead of going into the commodity markets, now India is buying Venezuelan oil directly from Venezuela outside of the commodity markets, which means that India is getting cheaper crude from Venezuela as well. India is setting up a refinery in the United States, in Brownsville, Texas. Okay, so supply chain is being also redirected. All right. Then the step three. Step three is pretty vicious. Okay, which is that remove the Middle East from the petrodollar equation altogether, or do something to make sure that it has very limited availability. The old model used to be what? US military protection, Gulf stability, Middle Eastern oil, dollar trade. Simple, a very simple system, right? But the new model is that Western Hemisphere production, Atlantic and Pacific exports, and then dollar trade. And in this whole entire Atlantic Pacific, you can add Arctic to the equation as well. This is why President Trump, actually, he has been after Greenland too. Why? Because Greenland has lots of natural resources and all, and that actually ensures the whole entire supply chain through the Arctic. Okay, so technically, if you look into it, then the US no longer actually needs to maintain the same level of geopolitical dependence on Saudi Arabia and the Gulf just to protect the dollar energy system, right? Why? Because they're already moving it. Okay. And that's the geopolitical payoff. Then you come to the step four. Step four is even more interesting. Why it is interesting is because it's not just about oil at this point. You remember how in the Middle East you have Qatar, right? So what Qatar is doing? Qatar provides the natural gas. Iran was the same way. Iran has more natural gas than the crude. So if you look into the data, okay, you find that this whole entire plan is not just about the petrodollar as more uh, anymore, right? So this has potentially become oil plus LNG plus pipelines, refineries, then Western commodity markets plus dollar financing, meaning that, and in fact, you have to understand this too, that add into this whole entire thing, in this whole entire thing, you can add America's security guarantees too, supply chain security guarantees, which means that lower insurance cost as well, meaning that over the period of time, what we are going to see is that Lloyd of London will be out of the scene. Okay, I don't know how many of you tracked Keir Starmer's statement that that shipping insurance, the oil shipping insurance and all is not going to be cheap anytime soon. Or actually, no, he said that oil prices are not going to come down soon anytime soon. Why? Because insurance cost will be high, and insurance companies have to. Those Lloyd of London has to recover the cost. That's what the whole entire idea was behind it. Okay. But when this whole entire financial system, the Western commodity markets, dollar financing, all that is gonna all that moves to the Western Hemisphere, what happens then? Then US will start to provide these security guarantees in the Western region. That's exactly what it is. Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine was introduced with this aim in mind. That was the goal. When President Trump said that, yeah, we have to protect the dollar because losing dollar dominance meaning losing a war. That's why he's working on the war footing at this point. So, with this whole entire mechanism in place, US will start to provide the insurance and security guarantees, at least in the Western Hemisphere. And then for the rest of it, they will work with their regional partners, like in India, China, and South China Sea. Russians will provide that in the Arctic. And this will open all the shipping lanes for the energy supply chain. In return for what? In exchange for the guarantee that this supply chain will never be disrupted in any way. And if you look into it, then for the most part, it won't be. At least on paper, at least that's what it looks like. Unless somebody decides to still, make a mess somewhere. I don't think so. Okay. Then comes the step 5. Step 5 is that the whole entire plan, if you put it all together, what do you find? You find that United States, their strategic bet is very simple. President Trump's possible calculation that becomes is that why spend like enormous military and political capital trying to defend an energy system that is centered around thousands of miles away from United States, right? Which makes perfect sense. He sees it this way, and he also sees that when America can increasingly anchor the whole entire system in its own hemisphere, then why even rely on those? Up until now, actually, what happened is that another reason for US, I would say, to keep the petrodollar system in the Middle East was because of the Israel security. And they also figured that as long as the system is working, let's keep it this way. And then we will look into it down the line. Okay. At that time, there was no risk. So nobody really bothered much. This was a simple way. They took it and they went with it, right? And now, when we see that all these countries are becoming economically rich, and they're becoming economically well off, so they're starting to raise their voice that, oh, get out of here. This is our region. You cannot be here. Bring war at our doorstep, this and that. Fair enough. And that's what it was. When you saw that, okay, it is becoming an inconvenience for the America's economy, considering all the national debt and everything. 40 trillion, it has reached 40 trillion, and then debt is 40 trillions. The debt servicing is already above $1 trillion. Debt servicing is above $40 trillion, and America's most of the America's national debt is domestic. It is 65% is almost domestic. So when somebody says that, oh, China owns this much, China buys most of America's debt, it's all BS actually. China doesn't buy any America's debt or anything. China had lots and lots of investment in the treasury securities and all that. Okay, and now after it used to be $1 trillion or more than that, but now China's uh, share in the treasury security is almost $650 billion. That's it. They're withdrawing from there slowly and slowly, and they're buying gold in using that money. All right. So this is the 5-step plan. Okay. Now there is a tad bit of flaw in this plan. The flaw is that the big assumption that other countries are going to buy it from the United States forever. That could be the case, but if, let's say, they don't buy it, then what? In that situation, in that case, situation will be created in the Middle East so that countries don't give up that idea. They continue to buy from the Western Hemisphere. And unless, I mean, not and, but unless US cuts some sort of deal with Iran and says that, hey, if you just start to sell the oil in dollar, we will be fine. And we will remove the sanction from you. You start to sell oil in dollar. What will that do? It actually creates a competition for Saudi Arabia. Right now, Saudi Arabia can use this whole petrodollar as a leverage that, hey, we are not going to invest in your security, we are not going to invest in treasuries, we are not going to sell oil in dollar. But when you have Iran doing the same thing, it creates a competition. And when that creates a competition, then Saudis will think 1,000 times before even giving up that idea. And in that situation also, countries that have their own thing going on, with the shorter supply chain like India and China and all, they're already buying these oils from and natural gas and all that from Middle East. They will continue to buy in dollar. So dollar will still remain protected one way or the other. So with the whole entire thing, the way things are panning out, the Arctic, the Middle East mess, then how big countries, all these countries are moving their supply chain into the Western Hemisphere, this is what it will come down to eventually. That to protect the dollar, US has to do these things. Now, other equation that I think that US is going to use to redirect countries to the Western Hemisphere to buy energy and all that is through AI. Now, some of you are like, what do you mean AI? See, US already just few days ago, US said that either you are part of the US AI ecosystem or you are part of Chinese AI ecosystem, which means that US will stop other countries from having their own AI ecosystem. And if they cannot, because having your own AI ecosystem is not easy and it's not cheap. That you have to understand few things here. Okay, so if the countries join the Pax Silica, lots and lots of countries may join, they may become part of that ecosystem. And when they become part of that ecosystem, then that's a dependency that gets created. And like I said, that dependency, vulnerability, solution, and consequences. So with that dependency, US can actually ask these countries to, hey, continue to buy energy from us too. Let's work together, this, that. Why? Because if you don't buy energy and all these things from us, then it can hurt our AI infrastructure. That's what funds it. So we will have problem. And I'm saying this in a nice way. Otherwise, we all know how US uses, the techniques that US uses to actually coerce countries into doing what they want to do, right? So that's another aspect to it. But all in all, this is a grand plan to basically protect the dollar. That's what it is about. Okay, so I hope you guys learned something from it. Please do like and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys in another video. Take care.